So one of the things I really wanted to bring up in regard to my first experience in getting licensed was that I had a home study completed, and for some reason the caseworkers weren't calling me back, and I was concerned. And here was kind of the problem. The problem was that I didn't have a chance to review the home study. So when they came in to ask me all kinds of questions about my past and all kinds of just very intrusive questions about my life, I never saw the home study. So while I was submitting all my requests for all these children that was interested in, and I wasn't getting any calls back, it turned out that my home study had some very interesting information about myself that I didn't feel was accurately reflecting my home or a good reflection of me. And so you might want to make sure that that home study is something that you get a chance to review. I think that that is something that all families should have a chance to review before it becomes finalized and submitted to caseworkers. That was discouraging because it set me back on my adoption journey, as in I had to go back and contact the person who performed the home study, and then I had to point out all the questionable information that was placed in there, and then we had to make sure that that was not included in the home study, since it was not an accurate reflection of me or my character, or actually my current living situation. So please be sure to check your home study. They'll tell you that they're not allowed to give it to you, but they do, and they are responsible and required to allow you to see the home study. That was really important for me. And then also what I wanted to share was, in the process of me training for my adoption license at the second foster agency, during this time I had received a letter from the Department of Family and Protective Services regarding an investigation that was had about me, and the results of the investigation. Well, the investigation was on emotional abuse and physical abuse of my adoptive son that had been placed in my home for adoption and had been discharged. Well, that was a shocker to me, knowing that the Department of Family and Protective Services was conducting an investigation about me without even coming to my home to get any information from me as to what the allegations were and how I could provide or contribute any information in order to defend myself in this investigation. Thankfully, the investigation for the emotional abuse and physical abuse allegations were ruled out. However, I probably would have definitely appealed those decisions if they were different, because I was not allowed to be a part of the process. So again, just be mindful that when you decide to engage with the government in regard to Department of Family and Protective Services, you will probably be denied many of your constitutional and basic rights, basic human rights. You will be guilty until proven innocent. You will be slandered, and pretty much you're at the mercy of whatever they say. If they say you're XYZ, then you have the responsibility to get an attorney and spend maybe thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to prove that you're not XYZ. Okay, so be mindful of that, please. So that was, again, another trauma. These traumas are building slowly as I continued to engage with Department of Family and Protective Services, all in the interest of doing a good deed, right? And I think it's important for people that have been in the foster care system, that have aged out or have been adopted, and to know that I did subject myself to all these intrusions and violations against my human rights to do a good deed. My intentions were to provide a safe and loving home for a child, and to give them as much normalcy as possible. That was the extent of my commitment to want to accomplish this goal and to be able to do that for someone. So please know that if you've been in foster care or if you've aged out of foster care, people do subject themselves to a lot of scrutiny and just a lot of uncomfortable, uncomfortable actions that are against us. It's very, very hard. And side note here, I can completely understand why there are so many American citizens adopting from other countries, because of the fact that the Department of Family and Protective Services, just based on my 3-year journey with them, is not very enthusiastic about adopting children out of the foster care system. And I have a hunch it could have to do with money, maybe a budget item or a line item on their budget. That's just my opinion. But unfortunately, children equal dollars in this department. So on with the certification of the new foster care agency and how that went for me. I'm excited to share that because I feel that this is part of the journey that a lot of people don't talk about. And so one of the things that I realized in my journey is that, number one, the foster care agency is not my friend. It is not my friend. It is not interested in anything that I go through in terms of, as long as it doesn't affect their bottom line, which is the children. So what I learned was that Department of Family and Protective Services, they contract foster care agencies to find families to place these children. And so when I got licensed the second time, this agency was so nice to me. They were so friendly. They were above and beyond anything I had ever experienced with the previous agency. They were so helpful. They wanted to send meal trains to my home. If I was too overwhelmed, they would offer respite. They were very good about that. But that wasn't because they were caring about me. And I just realized that recently. And it's important for you to know that. You're just a family where they can place children, and foster care agencies don't work for free. Foster care agencies or organizations are not set up so that they are doing this for free or for a goodwill. Foster care agencies make money off of children who come into their agency, right? And that are paid by Department of Family and Protective Services. They have a contract with them. And so, unfortunately, they have clients, and the clients are the foster care children. Without foster care children, the foster care agency does not make any money. Let's just be clear about that. So just know that as a foster care home or a facility, you are basically the only way that they can ever make money. So please keep that in mind. One of the things I also noticed was they target people who are very compassionate. Okay, so they'll take your compassion and they'll say, you could be a great foster family. There's amazing things that you can do, right? You can help the bio moms. You can help these children that have been neglected, right? And so that's the narrative. You can help. What you're doing is actually a good deed. And that's what they make you believe. However, they don't tell you CPS took the children away from a perfectly good family. CPS is actually using their power to weaponize and to separate, okay, children from their parents. They don't tell you that. They also don't tell you that when the child is placed in your home and they wind up being moderate care or specialized needs, that they didn't even have those issues when they were with their own biological family. Why wouldn't they tell you those things? So they take advantage of people like you and me who want to do a good deed. And we believe that we are helping children. And we believe that we're helping biological families. We're doing them a great service. However, the downside of that is you don't know, and I don't know, the child that's placed in my home, whether that child is placed in our homes because there is a legitimate safety concern, or if it's just CPS using their power and their influence to separate children from their families. Perfectly normal, well-functioning homes. Because that's something they won't tell you. And that's something you will never know. And I needed to say that because I do believe that there are many people in our country that are being targeted and they are being marketed, right? Oh, this poor child. They'll put pictures in the mall of all these children that are waiting for a home and that are in adoptive status, right? Okay, but they don't tell you the whole story. They tell you what they want you to know. So going back to me getting licensed with this amazing foster care agency, I was beside myself to have so much support. And the goal, right? The goal for this certification in specialized care was to use this certification to try and get my adoptive son placed back into my home so that he could have permanency. So after I completed the training, that was in July of 2020, I worked with the executive staff, informing them how are we going to be able to communicate with CPS about my intentions on wanting to get these children back placed in my home, or this child anyway. And they looked at my email that I was going to send on how I was continuing to be interested in this adoptive child, and they said it's good to go. We approve of this message. So I sent the message out, and to the CPS caseworker supervisor, just explaining all of the extra steps that I had taken, additional trainings that I had taken, just all the extra research I had done on how to care for children that have specialized needs. I invested 5 to 6 more months of just additional training and research to better understand how I can serve this child. And so I sent that email to the supervisor, and I received a phone call from the CPS caseworker informing me that after thorough consideration with herself and CASA, they felt it was in the best interest for the child not to return to my home. Okay. And the child's needs were too difficult and challenging to be placed back in my home. That was their response. So that was sometime in September of 2020, and that was a very big devastation for me. It was a devastation for me because I felt like a failure. I felt also that I let this child down. I felt that this child had felt abandoned by me, and that maybe that their self-worth had diminished yet one more time. One more person who didn't want them, one more person who didn't come back for them, one more person who just didn't care, right? Let me remind you that this child was in my home as a 9th or 10th placement in their 3-year time with CPS. My heart was broken. I was very physically ill, emotionally traumatized, and completely feeling hopeless and helpless. With that being said, because my intentions with this license was to only adopt the child that had been previously in my home, I did not want to take on any placements. I was not a foster placement. I was interested only in adopting, and at this time I was no longer even interested in adopting, but I did entertain the idea that I could provide respite care for some of the foster families that were needing some rest with their placements. So I did do those things. I offered and made myself available to do respite care. And I did a few of those, and I was glad to be able to help in that capacity. Now, fast forward to November 2020. In November 2020, I received a phone call from the executive director of this foster care agency. And the phone call went something like this. Hello, I just wanted to let you know we have a 6-year-old little boy who needs a placement. He is currently in a shelter with 3 of his other brothers. And so we wanted to know if you would consider taking this placement. They gave me the age of the other brothers, which was 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a possibly, I think, 2-year-old. So 2, 3, 5, and 6. And so I asked, well, what about the 5-year-old? Since this person had mentioned that they didn't have a placement for the 5-year-old yet. Well, I was informed that the 5-year-old was nonverbal and partially potty trained, and that they were having some difficulties finding a placement for this child. The plan was that each sibling brother would be placed in separate homes, 4 separate homes. 4 brothers, 4 separate homes. With that being said, I asked for some time to think about whether or not I would like to take the placement, and I would get back with them tomorrow. With that being said, I contacted the agency and I accepted the placement for the 6-year-old, and I also extended my home to the 5-year-old as well. Of course, I wasn't understanding completely what that would look like in my home and the challenges that would be awaiting me. I was told that the children were basic care, which was good because after having had specialized needs, I was probably not willing to take a specialized needs so quickly. Another thing that I was told was that this was just a very short-term placement. The mother was doing her services. The trial is set for July, so maybe 7 months. And so I took on that placement for one very, very specific reason. And this message is for the biological parents. I took on the placement and the responsibility to provide care and safety to your children these two children to be a help to you, to be a help to the biological family, to the biological parents, for them to have peace knowing, okay, at least two of the siblings are together and somebody's going to be taking care of my children until I can get all these services completed. I did it to come alongside you. I did this, and I offered my time and my life, right? My life to help your children and to keep them safe. It was a labor of love. No one made me do faster. Nobody's forcing me to do these things. I did it out of my own will. So with that being said, the children, the two little boys, were placed in my home, 6 years old and 5 years old. They were very wonderful children. They were kind and they were friendly for about a week or two. After that, the behaviors became extremely accelerated and challenging. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of some of the challenges that I experienced with these amazing foster children. The 6-year-old, when placed in my home, was on a prescription medication, psychotropic, for helping sleep. It's called clonidine. Clonidine 0.2 milligrams at bedtime. The 5-year-old was not on medication, was nonverbal, and partially potty trained. Okay, so this is what CPS explained to me. They're basic. These are kind of the things that they need. All right, and so we know that CPS is not very thorough, nor do they provide enough information. Because if they did, we would probably not consider the placement. With that being said, my 6-year-old my 6 and 5-year-old were having nightmares, very severe nightmares. What does that mean? That means that while they were placed with me, I had a job that I had to go to, and in the middle of the night, they would come into my room, or the older one would come into my room and interrupt my sleep and say, I'm having a nightmare. I'm very afraid. So that happened almost every night. Almost every night. And so that was difficult because I'm losing sleep. But I wanted to continue to serve these children and not have them discharged. My goal was no discharge at all. We will not interrupt or disrupt this placement because I'm losing sleep. Okay, let's just make that clear. Well, what I also learned was that the 5-year-old was not only partially potty trained and wore pull-ups, that's okay, but he was having nightmares so severely that he saturated his entire diaper, his entire pull-up, all of his pajamas, up to his chest with urine and through the bed sheets on a daily basis. So every day I would have to take the bed sheets off and the mattress cover, put him in the washing machine, put him back on, and do that repeatedly for several weeks. In addition to that, my 6-year-old did not want to get up to go to school. So another challenge, right? So the bus had to come and pick him up at 7 a.m. And so when 7 a.m. came, it took everything in me to have to get him to the bus stop. So much so that I had to call the foster care agency for crisis response in the mornings because remember, you cannot force the child, you cannot touch the child, you cannot, okay, there's a lot of things you can't do, right? So for the first couple of weeks, I got the assistance of the foster care agency. Again, they did an amazing job. They came, they They worked their trust-based relational intervention skills and techniques on this child, and I watched how they did it so that I can implement it myself. So there we have these things that were taking place in the morning right before I had to get to work. And again, I was determined that the children would not be discharged. So as time went on, the 6-year-old became verbally and physically abusive, violent, self-harming, and was just in a lot of distress. I understand now that the child was afraid to be in my home. The child was missing his mother and did not want to be in foster care. Totally, all of those are very legitimate reasons to feel distressed. So, with the help of the foster care agency, they were able to help me and equip me to keep the child regulated and to bond with the child. This was the 6-year-old. Amazing, just an amazing 6-year-old. I mean, full of love, so much love, so much love. And so we did that, right? We did that for a while. So my level of commitment to these children were that when they were placed in my home in November of 2020, right? During holidays, they didn't do very well with transitions or with people like my adult children and my grandchildren. And so one of the responses that my foster sons had when they were placed, the 5-year-old, was that when my grandchildren came home for Thanksgiving to celebrate, the 5-year-old slapped my granddaughter in the face, just for no reason at all. And I could see that that was not good for them. That transition, they did not do well with a lot of people. They didn't do transitions well, from meal time to bath time, from bath time to bedtime. It was yelling, screaming, and shouting, picking up my TV trays and attempting to throw them at me. It was not a safe situation, right? So this was a bit, honestly, very scary. I had already had interactions with CPS before. I had already had an investigation due to, the previous child being unstable. And here I am again in the same situation. However, they are considered basic. I contacted the foster care agency and explained some of the things that I was having to do that were above and beyond basic supervision. One of them was that the children kept eloping. So if I took them to the park, they would just bolt into the street, which was not safe. And then they wouldn't come back when I would call them. Another thing that they would do was pee in public places, just pull their pants down and just urinate. Another thing they did was at home, they would urinate on the bathroom floor, not in the toilet, on the floor, like all of it on the floor. And in other situations, they would pee on the carpet, just in their bedroom, just right there, just pee on the carpet. Lots of behaviors and a lot of work, right? So in addition to that, again, I'm going to do it because I don't want the children to be discharged. And I wanted to provide them with, I didn't want to disappoint them. I didn't want them to feel rejected. I didn't want them to feel abandoned. What they were experiencing was a great trauma, and I was doing my best to make sure that they felt safe and loved. In that process, during this time, the children are having virtual visits with their mom. They had the in-person visit in Christmas time, right? So this was good. However, the children were very upset with their bio mom about why they were again in foster care for a second time. and just expressing their frustrations to her during their visits, their virtual visits, and then of course when they had to hang up, it was very hard on the foster children, and I'm sure it was hard on the mom as well. In the in-person visits, those were really hard too, because they didn't want to leave their mom. They loved her very much, right? And so I get a phone call somewhere around December, maybe January, from a CASA, this CASA supervisor from Hayes County, and she tells me, I wanted to know if you would consider being an adoptive placement for these children. And I was taken aback, and I said, absolutely not, because I was told this is going to be a short-term placement. The mother's working her services, everything is going great. So yeah, no, I'm not willing to be an adoptive placement. That was not part of the agreement. And I asked, why am I getting this phone call? And I was informed that there were concerns that the biological mother was not doing so well with the services, was not being compliant with regards to some concerns that they were having. Okay, so my answer was no, I'm not going to be an adoptive placement. What happened was, because the foster children weren't doing well, I made a decision after speaking with their therapist, after speaking with the foster care agency case manager. They were going to need a lot more consistency, a lot more predictability in their schedule, and a lot more structure, which meant that I wasn't going to just be able to go about my normal life and just drag them everywhere that I go. That was not working for them. I literally stopped volunteering in things that I used to volunteer in. I also, for a period of 6 months, from January through June, did not have any family gatherings with my children or my grandchildren at all, because my focus was to completely engross myself in making sure these children knew the routine and what was going to happen on a day-to-day basis, and that wasn't going to change. And I noticed that I was really seeing a lot of progress, and it was very well worth the sacrifice and the commitment. And so they were doing well, knowing that Monday through Friday, they would be getting up, going to school, getting on the bus. They would be picked up from daycare, and then after daycare, they already knew that they would be having dinner with me and or having meetings with their therapist or some caseworker or CASA worker. Intermittently those things would happen, but they had a schedule. Bedtime was at 8:30, and at 8:30 we would do nursery rhymes, we would sing songs, and then we would do prayers, and I would literally not leave the room until they fell asleep, until they felt safe enough to fall asleep. So I did that for 6 months, and I saw a great improvement in their behaviors. Okay, what happened was that our schedule consisted of Monday through Friday, school, daycare, picking them up from daycare, coming home and having dinner, and then doing after dinner doing bath time, after bath time a little bit of TV time, and then bedtime by 8:30. After 8:30, and when they fell asleep, that's when I would have to do my chores. I would have to do the dishes, do the laundry, and everything else that I wasn't doing in order to make them feel safe and consistent and present. I had to be present. I just couldn't just leave them sitting here watching TV by themselves. That was not something that was fruitful, and that didn't work for them. They demanded attention and affection. So I did all this during this time. In addition to that, the children were very behind on their medical care. The 5-year-old had 0 immunizations, 0. And the 6-year-old had maybe half of their immunizations. So when I took them to their doctor, Well, I had to have repeated visits to make sure that we can catch up on the immunizations. I had to have visits to the eye doctor to see if their eyes were well, which we found out they needed glasses, which meant that we needed to do follow-up visits. So from the time that they were placed in my care, right, they had cavities, 6 cavities, with needing a root canal and a crown and sealants. I mean, these children were so neglected that they required a lot of medical care up front. And I was the one who was doing that. Total of 23 provider visits for my 5-year-old and 21 provider visits for my 6-year-old from November 2020 to May 2022. Okay, it's important to know that. There was a lot of work on the front end to make sure that these children got up to speed. So, in addition to all these provider visits, my job was being threatened. So, in November, the children were placed with me, November 2020. And because they were needing so many follow-up care visits, I went to my boss and I explained, listen, I'm going to need to take the children to a follow-up visit. Literally, my boss told me, how does anybody keep a job doing foster care? Well, at that point, I felt that my job was at risk. And not only did I feel that it was at risk, I had to deal with the faces, the huffing, the puffing. Again, fully committed, right? I am not going to have these children discharged. That was not going to happen under my watch. So during this time, I'm continuing to do other things as well. So what happened in January? Well, what happened in January was I put them in basketball right away. So they were in basketball, and my oldest foster son did amazing. His highest scoring game was 12 to 14 points. That was just literally within a few months of them being placed in my care. After basketball, right away after basketball, I put them in soccer. We didn't have any breaks, right? Because I wanted to keep them busy. And again, my oldest foster son did amazing. His highest scoring game, I think, in soccer was 6 points, which was great. Not only was that's his highest scoring game, but he was actually leading the warm-up exercises as well. Amazing, right? That's what I thought. In addition to that, I was very involved in their school, right? So I was getting their art information and participating in those arts to make sure what is it that they're lacking and what could I do on my end, right? To make sure we can get them up to speed. Well, it turned out that they were having a lot of problems with their writing. They didn't have the ability to write well. And so right away, I put them in after-school tutoring. We did after-school tutoring with Kumon, probably 4 days a week, as many as we could go. And so I was sitting there watching them, and sometimes I would have to sit next to my 5-year-old because he refused to participate in the after-school tutoring. So there I would be right there next to him, encouraging him. No, we're going to do this. I know you don't like this, but this is what we're going to have to do. I was very committed to their success, right? It was a joy. It was a joy to be able to see them grow and improve, and just by leaps and bounds. And so the ARD said that my 5-year-old foster son was going to need speech therapy, 210 minutes, and he knew very little words. He could not put sentences together. I could identify maybe 1 or 2 letters of the alphabet. So very, very deficient academically, very deficient. I took him to an appointment that was called a complex care appointment, where they get to work with the children and see where are they deficient, occupationally, physically, all these things, right? Speech. And at that time in March of 2020, my 5-year-old was a 5-year-old, and 5 years and maybe 4 months old, and he was developmentally 3.5 years old. 3.5 to 4 years old. Okay, so that's something they don't tell you when they place the children in your care. The children is 5 and 6, but developmentally, what the capacity of how they can function was only a 3.5-year-old or 4. He couldn't button his shirts. He couldn't get himself dressed. He could take his clothes off. That he could do. but he just could not get dressed, brush his teeth, comb his hair. Neither could the 6-year-old. The 6-year-old could get dressed, but no brushing teeth and no brushing hair. So with that being said, I continued to work very, very hard and continued to encourage the children. Don't worry, your mom is going to be finished soon, and July will be here very soon, and you'll be back with your mother in no time, right? That was the deal. Well, it turned out that in March, the mother was getting in-person visits, supervised by the grandmother, which was great. They got to go to a jumping house, right? It's called Jumping World. And they got to meet their mom there with their other 2 little brothers. And that was really good because they got to spend a lot of family time together, at least for a couple of hours. And what happened was that my 6-year-old foster son was reporting some interesting things that were happening at the visits. That, of course, as foster parents, everyone knows that you have to report everything to the CASA or the foster care agency or someone. And so because my foster son was reporting these things that were not supposed to be happening, I had to report that. Right? That's separate and apart from how I was hoping they would be reunited with their mother, right? And so because of these reports by the foster son, CPS was off and on. They were hot and cold. Some days the mom could visit in person, some days she couldn't, and some days the biological mom just couldn't get here. She had to drive 3 hours to get here. She was coming from San Marcos all the way to Houston. So that was a bit of a challenge, I would imagine. And so in March, it might have been in March, maybe February, I contacted the CASA supervisor from Hays County. And I contacted her and I said, listen, I have a question. You mentioned that the mother doesn't have any support system. Is it possible if the mother would consider moving to Houston so that I can provide support to her? Okay. I can pick the children up from daycare. If she has to work in the evenings, I can watch them. I can watch them on the weekends if she has to work on the weekends. I can do a lot of things that can help her if she's willing to move to the Houston area and nearby where I live, at least within 10 miles. And this is what the CASA told me. Oh, no, that's really nice of you, but she hasn't been very cooperative. I'm wondering if the CASA supervisor actually communicated that to you, Bio Mom. Because had she communicated that to you, maybe you would have your children right now. I don't really know. There's more, of course, to this story than just this. So on we go. They're doing visits off and on, hot and cold. And I'm just stuck between trying to provide a safe and loving home for the foster children, trying to continue to keep them encouraged that they will be going home, trying to keep them engaged with recreation and growing and in their academics, right, in their school, so that they can do well. So March came around, April came around, May came around, and they had some kind of a permanency hearing in which I was asked to participate and testify about some of the things that the children were reporting to me and also some of the trauma that they had when they came into my care. One of the traumas was that when I was trying to bathe my 5-year-old foster son, again, he did not know how to bathe, when I would put him in the tub and start getting the cup of water to pour it on his little head to let him start getting rinsed off, he would rush to the back of the tub away from the faucet, and he would cower and he would say, don't hurt me, don't hurt me, don't hurt me. And so that happened for 6 weeks, every single day. The child, I had to count and sing in order to get the child to be able to agree to a bath. bath time was traumatic for him. I can't imagine what happened, and I don't want to even try to guess. And of course, we know that it took me probably 30 minutes to bathe the child instead of 10 minutes or 15 minutes, like a normal bath. Everything took longer. Everything was slower. Everything took less time. I had less time to do things throughout my day. And I was okay to do that. I was willing to do the work. Again, willing to do the work. During this time, they were learning a routine, and they were coming along very, very well. We did picnics in the park. We went to many different parks. We did bike riding and just all kinds of things to keep them busy, right? They're active and they had a lot of energy. So after soccer, right, that probably ended around April, near the end of April, maybe early May. There was a little bit of a break there, and then we started summer swimming after school was out. And summer swimming was from July to September. I wanted to make sure that they had the ability to know how to swim and to learn how to swim. So we did swim lessons. Now in June, right, I had committed to go to serve at a conference in Montana. And so I had asked CPS if I could take the children with me for vacation, since I had already made that commitment before they were placed with me. And so yes, I got the approval and they were able to come to Montana. Now that was scary, right? Because you don't know, are they going to run in the airport? Are they going to, I don't know, right? So got them their little suitcases, and off we went, and into the Intercontinental Airport, Bush Intercontinental, one of the biggest airports in Houston. So they did an amazing job. They were the best. I mean, no issues at all. We got to Montana. They had a wonderful time there. They went mountain hiking at Memorial Falls. It was a great time. I think it was a mile up. And so they had a great time. And during their time there, they had a scheduled virtual visit with their bio mom. And that was in June. And the older foster son was just having some behaviors during this virtual visit where he was doing things that were unsafe while he was on the phone, and it was just not good. So I had to redirect, of course, and do those things. But overall, I felt that the meeting had gone well, and the mother had a chance to see and talk to her children. Well, July comes around, and I'm excited, right? Because something good is going to happen, right? They're going to be reunited. I'm guessing. I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because CPS, nor CASA, or the attorney Ad-Litem at the time ever communicated, nor the foster care agency ever communicated anything with me about what's going on with the court. They did not even give me one report. CASA submitted reports to the court, never once ran them by me to see if the information was accurate or if there's anything else that I needed to add. That's important because they just submit some information, but not all information. And then also, I did not get a copy of the permanency report that was submitted by CPS to the court while these children were in my care. So one of the things that was conflicting, I think, later on is that I later found out that CPS was reporting to the judge that the children, the brothers, were having weekly sibling visits, which that's not true. Okay, that's not a true statement. And of course, CASA was reporting that they were having monthly visits. Now that is true. So the CASA reports and the CPS reports were not consistent. They were not in agreement. I later found that out, not while they were placed in my care. So that's a problem. The problem is that as a foster parent, I was not informed. I was not given any copies of the reports that were being submitted to the court. I had no idea what the judge was being told, or whether or not I could agree to that. Okay, or if it was even true or not. So that's a problem. The second problem to that is that if it wasn't true, who will you tell? Who are you going to tell to say, CPS, you failed to mention X, Y, and Z, and by the way, you're not telling the truth about the children having weekly visits because they're not. Who do you tell? No one. If you told your caseworker at the foster care agency, they're not going to tell CPS, hey, you're lying on your reports that the kids are having sibling visits every week. Well, and why wouldn't they do that? Well, because maybe the children will be removed just like that. Okay, we don't question the government and what they do. That's what I've learned. CASA is not any different. CASA is not going to change any information on the report or add any information that you think is important as a foster parent, right? Because they have a narrative that they want to give the judge, right? They have a story that they're trying to tell the judge. And unfortunately, that story is whatever they want the story to be. Unfortunately for the biological parents, it's sad because biological parents have to spend hours and hours of their time and of their day trying to get their children back, sometimes even thousands of dollars, okay, to get their children back because they're guilty until they're proven innocent. So be mindful of that. This is Hays County, one of the most questionable places of judicial process and judicial justice to anyone. Unfortunately, yes, I can say Hays County because the truth is the truth. So in July, the judge did not approve the children to go back to the biomom. Well, that was a little bit sad for me for two reasons. One is that my foster sons were looking forward to going back with their mother. And the second reason is that so was I. They had to stay until January. The judge extended the biomom's time to try to continue to complete the services, right? But nobody bothered to ask me, hey, do you want to continue the placement? Are you tired? Nothing. They just said, great, just keep on going. And I did because I loved these children. I had bonded with them. They had bonded with me and they trusted me. And so what happened was that July came and the judge, the CPS judge actually said, we're going to schedule family therapy sessions so that you can start having some therapy with your children, I guess in preparation to prepare the children to come back home. I thought that was a wonderful thing, and that was in July of 2020. Oh, no, July 2021, right? All this was July 2021 because they were placed in my care in November 2020. So anything that was January, February, March, April, May, June, July, all that was 2021. The basketball, the soccer, the swim lessons, and all these things. So that's my fault on that. Okay, so 2021. So July 2021, the judge is going to do some extra services for the mom and the family, and I thought that was wonderful. So fast forward to August 2021. August 2021, early on, my oldest foster son, well, let me just say this real quick. My foster children at this time have been doing weekly therapy sessions with a therapist from November 2020 to present date, August 2021. Weekly therapy sessions, right? And during these sessions, they're exhibiting all kinds of behaviors that apparently are inappropriate, right? So the 5-year-old was having and exhibiting some kind of play that was a little bit sexualized to where they thought there was a concern of maybe some sexual abuse of the 5-year-old. Nobody ever told me that, just that, I experienced it because the 5-year-old was attempting to touch me in ways that were not appropriate, and they were a sexualized behavior towards me. And so we had to make some changes and do some redirecting in that area. So August comes around and my foster son shares with me an incident that happened between him and his mother and his 3 other sibling brothers. in a jacuzzi. And it was concerning and inappropriate. And of course, again, I refer back to my duty and obligation as a foster parent. And anybody actually in the state of Texas is required by law to report anything that they consider to be emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, even if you don't even know if it's true, even if they suspect it. That's the obligation and the standard and the responsibility that we're held to. So with that being said, I contacted members of the team. I can't remember if it was the foster care agency or the CASA or both or CPS. Long story short, they were informed and I was instructed to file a hotline report, which I did. Well, with that being the situation, I had a concern because while this outcry, let's call it an outcry of sexual abuse, had been made in August, the judge was wanting family therapy sessions to take place with these children and their mother. That was a concern to me because typically, if somebody makes an outcry of sexual abuse by a family member, CPS doesn't say, let's do family therapy sessions. They say we have to remove the children, right? But in this case, CPS continued with the family therapy sessions. And I think that was an injustice. And I did my best to advocate for my foster sons in notifying and asking CASA, attorney Ad-Litems, foster care agencies, and CPS, excuse me, are we still going to be allowing the children to meet with their mother and family therapy sessions after an outcry of sexual abuse? I mean, should somebody let the judge know about this new information so that she can make a decision? No one was interested or concerned. This is for you foster children out there. Just so you know, you probably have been through this. I'm only going to speak to my own personal opinion, and that I don't think that that was a good decision to do the therapy sessions without first making sure that the judge knew. No one informed the judge, and so had that judge been informed and then had the judge made the decision to continue, that would have been different. But that was not the opportunity that my foster sons were given. So with that being said, that didn't go over so well. The foster care agency, the CASA supervisor, the attorney ad litem, and CPS from Hays County, Texas, that was not something that they were too happy about. So we continued to press forward and coordinate efforts to get this family therapy session going. And in the meantime, there was a forensic interview in September that was scheduled for my foster sons to be seen here in Houston regarding these reports that the children were making. In September, at that time, during that forensic interview, they said that it was not enough information to reason to believe. So no reason to believe. That's fine. So they ruled it out. And that was fine with me. On we go, and moving on to the family therapy sessions that started in October. The mother's therapy sessions were twice a month. So October the 1st, I think it was like the first week of October 2021, the children started having family therapy sessions with their mom. And I was the responsible party to make sure that their appointments were scheduled because they were using my eldest foster son's Medicaid to have these family therapy sessions. These sessions included the mom and all 4 sibling brothers, which is nice. I thought that was good. So what happened was that these sessions took place around 5:20, because remember how my boss was giving me a lot of, pushback on all these appointments that my foster sons were needing, right? So I said, look, I can't do during the day. We have to do it after work. So 5:20, 5:30. So we did that faithfully, and when I couldn't do it, I would schedule someone with the foster care agency to provide transportation so that they can be at these sessions. So fast forward to November, right? November came along, 2021, and my foster son said, look, I'd really like to get a Bible for my mom and my dad. You know, his father's rights were already terminated, but he really wanted to get a gift and write something very special in there. So one day before one of their therapy sessions with their mom, we went, and he had some birthday money that he had saved, but he didn't have enough for both Bibles. And so I put in the rest, and I recommended, hey, would you like to put their names engraved also? You can actually put their name on there if you want on the cover, which of course he was so excited about that. So we did that. So one of the sessions, one of the family therapy sessions, my foster sons was like, look, this is what we got you. They were so happy. They were just so delighted to give their mother a gift. And I was happy that they did it too, to the point where I said, well, let's take a picture of you and your mom, right, with your gift. And they did. So December comes around, and she's continuing to have her therapy sessions. And then January comes around, and at this point, the children are having a lot of trouble at school. They're having a lot of bad behaviors at school. It's taking them about 5 or 6 days to readjust to their routine after having visits with their mom. And the little brothers, I was told, were having self-harming behaviors after visits with their mom. So with that being said, the family therapist decided, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so she refused. She refused to continue the therapy sessions. In the meantime, there was a team of people that were involved in trying to stop the sessions. So the attorney Ad-Litem from Hays County District Court had contacted me saying, can you let me know what the behaviors are? How are the children doing? So I reported that the children were having some trouble at school. They were having some behaviors at school, right? But the other foster mom had said the children are terrified of the mom. They don't want to see her. They don't want to, they're scared of her, etc., etc. And I know that because I got the email. She actually included me in the email. So these are the things that were taking place, right? So what was taking place was then, okay, I was getting some respite care in between, and the children were thriving. They were doing really, really well in school, meeting their goals and objectives in their ARDs for the most part, except for when they were having visits with their mom. So they'd go up and then they'd go down. They'd go up and then they'd go down. So hot and cold, right? And so in January, there was supposed to be a trial, right? A trial for the mom again, and that was postponed. In addition to that, I was informed by CASA that the mother had informed the court that no one had gone to the family therapy sessions, that I had not taken the children to family therapy at all. That was a devastation to me because that was not true. So there I was getting all the information, and of course the family therapist was really just couldn't believe that these things were being said. So she provided her notes and things like that to convince the judge that what was being said was not truthful. And so because that's a violation of the order. And so in this situation, the biological mother was trying to get us in trouble, and that was very scary. I didn't have a lawyer. I had nobody. I didn't have anybody to represent me. So just keep that in mind. No lawyers. And so while this is going on, in January, when January came along, January 22, and some concerns started coming to my attention about some of the things that the foster care agency had done that was questionable to me. One of them was that I had gone into my portal. You have to sign in with your username and password. You go in and you just look around and see, okay, where do I need to update my training? What's coming up? And so that's what I was doing. When in my portal, I came across someone who had been assigned to my family. It was never disclosed to me that the foster care agency had added my 6-year-old foster son's mentor to my profile as a family member without letting me know. Mind you, he had already been accessing my foster son for over a year. Mentoring started around December 2020. We are now, December 2020. All of 2021. We are now in January 2022. And I'm seeing that this person is assigned as a family member. But that was not the troubling part. The troubling part is where it said completed approval process. The answer is no. Has not completed the approval process. You can imagine the terror that came into my mind of knowing that this mentor that the foster care agency had assigned my foster son to had not completed the approval process. I felt violated. I felt that my foster son had been placed in an unsafe environment. And I definitely contacted my caseworker asking her, why is this person added to my home as a family member? And why is it showing that they haven't completed the approval process? I definitely let them know my concerns and how disappointed I was that this had been done without my knowledge. Well, I didn't get a response from the foster care agency caseworker. She said, well, I don't really know. I don't know what's happening. I'll find out. Again, I followed up. Hey, any, what's the word? Nothing. Hey, what's the word? What's happening here? I don't want this person assigned to my home. Remove him from my home. Well, that's because he's a mentor. Well, then put him as a mentor, but do not add him as a person of my family. So we went back and forth for a while, and I finally said, hey, has this been done? Did you remove this person off of my portal as a family member? And no response. But I did get a response from the executive director of that foster care agency saying, this has been done. Well, it turned out that there was some friction there because the person that had not gotten approval process and who was actually having access to my foster son was the vice president of the foster care agency. So yes, quite a bit of a concern there, quite a bit of contention there. And that was where things started to change in regard to how the placement was going, how the children were doing in my care, and how the direction of whether or not these children should be in my home was beginning to become very clear. That there would be some disruption, but I didn't find out until later how all that went down. So for now, what we have is a concern about the foster care agency, their business practices, and basically putting my foster son at risk of being in an unsafe environment with a person who hasn't completed the approval process. Completely legitimate concern, right? Well, things just went downhill from there. Let me just say things went downhill from there. Because I continued to see other patterns and other business practices with the foster care agency that was so nice to me in the beginning. And me voicing my concerns to them, let me just say, did not benefit the placement and did not benefit the outcome of what happened to these foster sons in my care.